Nightmares are common, she said. She looked uncomfortable. Probably a gun owner, thought Hagen. For someone who saw active combat, it's not the combat that I dream about, he interrupted. Not usually. He was getting irritated with this woman. She hadn't really said anything helpful or even interesting. She kept trying to draw a link between his anti-gun movement and his military experience. But what you've done since the war, it must have affected you. Stop, he said. She did, and looked expectantly at him. I did not become active in the gun control movement because of the war, as you call it. I became active in gun control because within a month of being back in my country, I was shot 7 times while I stood in line to get a hamburger because some asshole picked up his dad's gun and decided today's the day. Hagen looked down at the floor. It was the first time he'd repeated that phrase since it happened. He hoped the therapist wouldn't press. Of course she did. Today's the day. Yeah. Hagen fiddled with his pen. His fingers were itchy. The guy walked into the restaurant, pulled out a gun, said, "That," and then opened up. I was closest to him, but I was talking to my daughter and I didn't realize he had a gun until he shot me. And your daughter? She was hit once in the shoulder. Bullet bounced off the ribs on the left side and hit her. She lost some blood, but she was okay. Hagen made a point of leaving his daughter's injury out of his campaign. The press usually did it for him, but he didn't want to capitalize on her pain. So why didn't you stop him? Hagen raised his head. Excuse me. You could have, right? You know how to disarm someone. Hagen nodded, never breaking eye contact. He wanted to be angry about this line of questioning, but somehow he couldn't muster it. So why didn't you? You weren't watching the door. Isn't that a little strange? Hagen nodded again. It was strange, and he'd beaten himself up about it ever since. He could have killed that stupid kid with his bare hands before he'd even raised his gun. If Hagen hadn't been the first person he'd shot, then he'd have been able to, but Hagen happened to be standing close enough that he made the most obvious target. But you missed it. And there's no reason for that. What? She took a sip of water from the bottle on her desk. There's no reason that it happened, Wayne. You were talking to your daughter and you didn't watch a door. But there's no reason that you should have been watching. You're not at war anymore, and you shouldn't have to watch all the time. That boy went crazy and started shooting, and you made that part of it, the gun part, into your cause because you had to do something, right? Maybe. She nodded at the clock. Let it go. Make another appointment, if you want. Hagen didn't. The dream started the same as the others. Back in Kosovo. It was Kosovo in '92. The unit had just been deployed to clear out a building. High-level enemy figure there, and Hagen's unit needed to get in, quick and quiet, grab or shoot the guy and get out. They had done it in 22 minutes. But in the dream, it was different. His men weren't armed. The enemy popped up with AK-47 knockoffs and opened fire. His men took cover, but they had nowhere to go. The insurgents came forward, never stopped the barrage. Lyman died. Ridley. Admanxi. Mahalik. Closer and closer, until Hagen heard bullets whizzing over his head. They'd surround him, they would all fire, and he would feel every bullet grinding him to pulp, just as he had on that horrible day at the restaurant. But this time, he reached down and realized he wasn't helpless. He pulled the gun from his holster. It was the gun, the one he'd found in the cloth. He fired 4 times, and 4 men lay dead. He woke up and pulled the lockbox from under the bed. He opened it and took out the gun. "Where did you come from?" he whispered. Something answered. He didn't hear the answer, only felt that something responded. Maybe it was in his mind, maybe he was half asleep. But something new he wanted to know. His phone rang.